Now we're in the still in the first chapter of Esther, verse 9, and we read this: Gam Vashti Amalka asta mishte nashim bet hamalchut asher lamelech Ahashverosh. Vashti had her own feast in the royal palace, and on the seventh day he tells the seven eunuchs or the seven servants, Mehuman bizeta harvona bikta v'avakta zeta v'charkas. Those names sound a little made up. They're not Persian names. They have like a Hebrew touch. I know
but it's very interesting that you give the names.
Right. That's why I said this. The Megillah is written for the stage. You could have the names of the characters. So you could give them more depth, and it's different than the rest of the Torah or the Tanakh, where the narratives are relatively succinct and dry. So he orders to bring Vashti to the king to show the nations their beauty, and she refuses. Now the Midrash took it to a different direction, saying, based on a literal reading of the text, where it says in verse 11, to bring her wearing a royal diadem, it says just the diadem and nothing else, which is not written in the text. And that was understood as a punishment for her torturing of Jewish women. And now, and on top of that, they say, of course she would have wanted to do it because she was an immodest person. Why wouldn't she do it? And the answer is, she contracted leprosy or some kind of skin disease. And in the Jewish schools that follow Midrash, kids were saying about ugly Vashti with pores and acne and whatever, and a tail even, in according to some versions. But all that is not in the text. Another element that the rabbis added to the text that is not there is that they made Vashti the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the temple. So that was done. This is a common technique of the rabbis in the Midrash, of adding a historical element to every story that goes beyond time and space. So it's not just an event that takes place in Shushan, in Persia. It connects to the destruction of the temple. So the destruction of the temple is a cataclysmic event.
But they don't in any way give how they made that.
No, right. So they write about the lineage, but it doesn't work out. It doesn't add up when we look at the names of the kings. Vashti also is a clearly Persian name. She cannot be Babylonian. But the rabbis wanted to do that in order to show this divine retribution. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple, so eventually his daughter or granddaughter is destroyed by Ahashverosh. But and before we go that, and also the idea is that most people think is that the Vashti was executed. Now all these assumptions are not true. When you read the text, you realize that in verse 12 it says this: "V'tema'ena malka Vashti lavo b'dvar hamelech asher be'ad hasarisim." Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs, and he was incensed. And then when he speaks to his seven advisors, also strange that they are mentioned by names, their answer is, they say their problem is with the disrespect that Vashti showed to the king. So we understand that was the problem. The problem was really the respect that they wanted from their wives and they didn't get. So this is also why Ahashverosh got upset, and this is why Vashti refused to come. It's the text is very careful in phrasing the words. She refused to come at the king's command, conveyed by the eunuchs, meaning if he would have come personally and said, Vashti, would you come with me, sit by my side, maybe she would have said yes. The way he did it, he sent his servants to fetch her. She probably sent him, even if she wouldn't be an American woman today, she would text him or maybe even publicly shame on Facebook, right? Saying my drunk husband is celebrating with his friend for 7 days, and only now he remembers that he has a trophy wife, right? And maybe she would also hashtag it in a way to show feminine power, but she was way ahead of her time. the stage was not set yet for women to speak up, to show independence, and she was still seen as a trophy wife. So Ahasuerus goes back to his advisors, and that is like I mentioned before about even the drinking was by law. So here also Ahasuerus wants to punish Vashti, but he is not that kind of a tyrant. He's not the tyrant that could do whatever he wants. He's the kind of tyrant that does it through a legislator. It's in a way like the Nazis were able to legislate everything into law. The complete dependence of the legal process also is seen in the Persian Empire. That even later on, when they realized that the law or the decree that was given to annihilate the Jews is incorrect or cruel a little bit, it was not recalled. It was just there was just permission given to the Jews to defend themselves. Yeah. Right. So he consults with the sages. Like, what should we do? What legislation should we create? And that's in verse 15. Kedat ma la'asodu malka Vashti. What is the dat? What is the law for her? Memuchan answers in verse 16. She did not disparage only you, but rather all of the ministers and all of the nations in all of your kingdom, because the women will now disrespect their husbands, saying Ahasuerus wanted to bring Vashti and she did not come. That really is the budding of a sort of feminist movement that was then nipped in the bud and killed. But the women, and I think it's interesting that they speak about the language, which language would be spoken at home, because part of the problem could have been the cultural mesh-up, this sort of a melting pot or cross-fertilization. As long as one culture would sit uninterrupted, undisturbed, so they would keep their norms. But when you have a mixture of cultures, and women of one culture see that women of another culture have greater freedom, that causes tension, and they say, we want to be like them. And there's something similar happened in Syria in the 1600s, in Damascus and Aleppo, when many Jews who escaped from Spain start trickling into Aleppo and Damascus. They were called Señores Francos, the European gentlemen, because they were, and they came with different mentality. And one of the differences was that their wives would stroll in the public places and hold events on their own, which local women, Jewish or Muslim, wouldn't do. And there was a lot of tension. The leaders of the community came to the rabbis and say, why do you let them do this? And we cannot do it. So I think that's also something that played a role here. And they say very clearly, those ministers are not afraid to admit that they're biased. They say in verse 18, "V'ayom hazeh tomarna sarot paras umadai, asher shamu et dvar hamalka lechol sarei hamelech, uchdai bizayon v'katzev." This very day, the ladies, not the ladies, the noble ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard the queen's behavior, will cite it to all your majesty's officials, us. So they say, we have to protect ourselves, and therefore we offer this legislation, which is, Asher lo tavo, in verse 19, Asher lo tavo Vashti lifnei hamelech Ahasuerus, umalchuta iten hamelech lirota tova mimena. She would not be allowed to come to the palace. It's not about execution. She was not executed. No. They were smart.
She was excommunicated.
Excommunicated, right. They knew, I think that's what they were thinking, that if she would be executed, he will mourn her for a while, but then he will get over it and get a new wife, as Henry VIII, I think, also did at a certain point. But now that she's excommunicated, she lives in the harem across the street or across the courtyard from him. And he cannot have her because he must follow it's the law that he just instituted. So they trapped him in his own cubicle, sort of, and this way they were able to manipulate him. And this is the story of the Megillah is really also about powerful people manipulating each other. So he does that, and he sends in verse 22 to all the nations, all the countries, Liot kol ish sorer beveto medaber kishon amo. He established the law that everyone should rule in his house and speak the language of his country. And the rabbis commented very sharply on that in the Megillah. They said, once they got these letters that said that the royal decree is to have everyone speak his own language at home, they said, we from now on we're going to take his decrees with a grain of salt. Because how are you going to enforce such a decree? Who is going to make sure that it is carried out? Are you going to put a woman in jail because she answered her husband in French when he speaks English? Or how can you really control that? So the rabbis commented that regarding the letter that was sent saying that in a year from now you could kill all the Jews. They say, why did they wait a whole year? Why didn't they do it right away? They were afraid that something will go wrong because they already saw what they consider to be a silly decree.
Where it says, and it is fairly clear, every man should wield authority in his own home and speak the language of his own people. Doesn't it mean that the men are totally in charge? That's what it's really saying.
Right. But it is funny, I think, when you look at it now, 2,500 years, something later, that the men of Persia and Media, the leaders, wanted a rule, wanted the law to be legislated to say that they rule at home, right? I mean, every time you speak to men today, they complain that women tell them what to do. Women complain that the men don't listen to them. And you see here that this debate was always on.
It's just part of life.
It's part of life. It is. It is. I mentioned before that book, The Red Queen. The Red Queen is about the constant race between men and women. Whatever you achieve, the other one is going to find a way to override it, and it's just an ongoing race. Nobody advances anywhere. So now in chapter 2, obviously, he wakes up finally and he realizes that Vashti is not with him anymore, and that's why it says Zachar et Vashti ve'et asher asata. He thought of Vashti and what she have done. It's not he thought of; he remembered her, and he remembered because he cannot get over mourning because she's right there; she's alive.
He's also been drunk.
He's been drunk, right? Right. They didn't have a couple of years ago, someone invented a special keyboard or something that, like an app, that prevents people from sending drunk emails. You connect it to the keyboard, and it senses when you linger on one key for too long, or you have long pauses between words.
The same thing they use for the cars. They breathe in, if it's too high, they can't.
No, without breathing, it just reads your writing patterns. Because you know that what things that you wrote when you're drunk, you're going to be regretful. But here he made a law, so they call all the women to Shushan. It's the theatrical setting, and now comes a Jewish man into the story. That is Mordechai. We are giving some of his genealogy. We know that his family came with the exile from Yerushalayim, so he's a nobleman. He was a stepfather, or he's a foster father to Hadassah, who was his uncle's daughter, meaning that she was his cousin, but for some reason everyone thinking that she was his niece, but she's his cousin. And we don't know why or what happened to her father and mother, and Mordechai took her as a daughter. So he was obviously much older than her, and it is also clearly written in the Megillah that they were not married, not engaged, not married. There's nothing between them. The rabbis decided that she was married to him. They said the word bat, which means daughter, they read it as bait, household, which is a euphemism for a wife. This runs into a problem with the fact that the Hashvarosh gathered only not married, unmarried, Na'ara Betula, virgin girls, right?
He adopted her.
Right, he's adopted, right. So why and not only that, the rabbis said that after she married Ahasuerus, she would go back and forth between the two. She would go to the mikveh and go back to Mordechai. And this is really strange. Why marry them and make it complicated where the Megillah says that she was an adopted daughter? And why in the world would she risk her life and his life going back to her Mordechai, even if he were her husband? The answer to that I heard from my professor at Bar Ilan, Professor Yitzhaki. He said that the Midrash was written at the time where there was a serious problem in Israel of women who were kidnapped by Greek soldiers or Roman soldiers, held captive sometimes for ransom, sometimes to pay a debt, and sometimes to be used. And so the rabbis legislated back then. They cared about those women who were captured and they went back to their family. They wanted to make sure that they are accepted by the family. So they said that a woman who was taken by force could return to her husband. Even if she was violated, the husband cannot claim that he was so religious that he doesn't want her back because she's unclean or unfaithful to him. He claims maybe she did it willingly. The rabbi said, no, there's no problem, she could come back to you. And there was a case recorded in Masechet Ketubot, that a woman who was captured in Ashkelon, and when she was released after the ransom was paid, the family rejected her. So the rabbis were trying to deal with it. So on one hand, they deal with it through halacha. On the other hand, they deal with it through midrash. They say, our greatest leaders, Mordechai and Esther, she was kidnapped by a non-Jewish king. She was violated, yet she went back to her husband and he accepted her. So, as strange as it seems, it was created by the rabbis for a reason, because they wanted to protect Jewish women of their time. But they're not married. So, Esther is taken to the palace. We know the name of the eunuch who takes care of the guardian of the women. She has 7 servants. It's the third time that we run into. He has the number 7 appears over and over again. 7 days of the feast, 7 eunuchs who serve Ahasuerus, 7 advisors, now 7 girls. But she still keeps in touch with Mordechai. Mordechai is this eminent entity. He walks back and forth in front of the courtyard. She listens only to him. So Esther is a very reclusive. She doesn't talk. She doesn't say anything about herself. And actually, that is her quality. That is the quality that that drew the king's attention. Because when she came to the king, she asked for nothing, except for what was given to her by the guardian. And that was her special charm. And because of that, Ahasuerus fell in love with her, and he crowned her, he made her a queen. He throws another feast. He loves feasts, he loves parties. He calls it the feast of Esther. And he gives discount, or it says tax breaks to the different countries. The rabbi said because he tried to figure out where she's from, but still she would not tell where she's from. Then in verse 19 of chapter 2, we see that the women were gathered again to the palace, and the rabbis say it is very probable that Ahasuerus was trying to crack Esther and get from her where is she from. So he thought maybe if she would be jealous, she will tell me. So he brought more women into the palace, yet she still remained quiet, and Esther still doesn't tell the king where is she from. It's a good question. Like, why is Esther mentioned as Hadassah only once? That's the double language of the Megillah, because it goes between 2 cultures, the Jewish culture and the Persian culture. So the months are mentioned as Adar, Chodesh Ahad Asar, Chodesh Ne'em Asar. So similarly, Hadassah is the Hebrew name, Esther is the non-Hebrew name. So now we accept Esther as a Hebrew name. It's interesting that in the Talmud, in the Gemara, they give different explanations to the word Esther, all based on the Hebrew, and then finally someone says, one of the rabbis says, "Sheken umot ha'olam kurim ota Ishtahar." He says the truth is, it's a non-Jewish name. It's the name of the idol, the goddess Ishtahar, which means star. It's from the Persian. Ishtahar came to all the Indo-Aryan languages as star, Esther, etc. And she remains with that name. Mordechai also is not a Jewish name. In Divrei Yamim is called Mordechai Bilshan, so he has another name. The name Mordechai comes from the name of the chief god of the Babylonian pantheon, Marduk. So you have the two protagonists of the Megillah are actually called by non-Jewish pagan names.
You think later on in time they'd be using Hadassah more than Esther? Do you find more Esther's floating when they do Hadassahs?
Yeah, but in the Megillah she's Esther, right? Then we have this little detail: Biktan Bateresh. Two of the bodyguards plan an assassination, and it doesn't work. Mordechai finds out. He tells Esther. She tells the king in the name of Mordechai. They were hung, and that's it. Impaled, you think? I don't know. They say impaled? Impaled on stakes. I doubt it. I don't know. I think the translator here was too much into Dracula. And that's what, Count Dracula really...
They were dispatched.
Yeah.
Where they repeated again, just before you got to that again, Esther was adopted as his own daughter. So it's repeated several times.
Yes, there's no way to say that they were married. Definitely, their relationship is that of a father and a daughter.
Yeah,
he's older, he's wiser, he's the father figure. She listens to him, and that makes the shift in the Megillah when she takes a completely different direction and she tells him what to do, all the more surprising.
Yeah.
So the Megillah is also the story of Esther coming of age and being an independent woman. So where it starts with Vashti, who tries to be independent in a confrontational manner, it doesn't work for her, and it ends with Esther, who is independent in a quiet way, behind the men's backs. Basically, she works behind Mordechai, Ahasuerus, and Haman, and she emerges victorious. So this is like the maybe one of the messages of the Megillah. This is how you do it. So now we get to chapter 3, and we meet Haman for the first time.